Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was the chosen successor of Dr. Doom. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The wind that whipped across the rooftop was a cruel, physical thing. It tore at Izuku Midoriya's thin school uniform, chilling him to the bone in a way the setting sun couldn't. But the cold was a distant sensation, a minor inconvenience compared to the glacial abyss that had just opened up in his chest. The words, spoken by his idol, his god, echoed in the vast emptiness where his dreams used to be. It's not wrong to dream. However, you need to be realistic. Izuku's fingers, white-knuckled, were still clenched around the straps of his yellow backpack. He could feel the corner of his burnt, waterlogged notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future, No. 13, digging into his spine. It felt like a tombstone now. A monument to a life of pathetic, wasted effort. All Might, the symbol of peace, the man whose smile was supposed to save everyone, had just delivered a death sentence. He'd done it with a pained, apologetic expression, but the words were no less absolute. Quirkless. Useless. A liability. He'd even left him here, on this locked rooftop, after signing his notebook as a hollow consolation prize. Izuku shuffled toward the edge, the gravel crunching under his red sneakers. He didn't look down. He didn't want to. He just stared at the horizon, at the sprawling city of Muzurifu that he had so desperately wanted to protect. A city full of people with powers, with purpose. A city where he was a statistical error, a throwback to a forgotten age. Tears, hot and fat, finally broke free. They traced cold paths through the grime on his face. He didn't sob. The sound that escaped him was a choked, broken gasp, the sound of a lung trying to draw breath in a vacuum. His entire life, every taunt from Kaken, every pitying look from his teachers, every lonely night spent analyzing heroes he could never be, it all crashed down on him. He had held on to a single, shimmering thread of hope, and All Might had just taken a pair of scissors to it. He stayed there for what felt like an eternity, the sky bleeding from orange to a deep, bruised purple. The city lights began to twinkle on, each one a star he could never reach. Defeated, he turned from the edge and made his way to the rooftop door. It was still locked. Of course, in his haste to leave, All Might hadn't even considered the logistics of leaving a distraught teenager on a skyscraper. Izuku slumped against the metal, sliding down to sit on the cold concrete. He would just have to wait. Wait for a maintenance worker. Wait for someone to remember him. It was what he was best at. Waiting. After another 20 minutes, a janitor finally came to check the roof, grumbling about a faulty sensor. He barely gave Izuku a second glance, just a gruff "beat it, kid," before locking the door behind him. The journey down the sterile stairwell and out into the bustling evening streets was a blur. The sounds of the city, the chatter of crowds, the roar of traffic, the distant wail of a siren, were a dull, oppressive hum. Izuku walked on autopilot, his gaze fixed on the cracked pavement in front of him. His path home was so ingrained in his muscle memory that he didn't need to think. Which was good, because thinking hurt. Thinking brought the image of All Might's skeletal form and the crushing weight of his words back to the forefront. Then, a new sound cut through his stupor. An explosion. It was close. Just a few blocks away. It was a sharp, concussive boom that rattled the windows of the nearby shops. Immediately, the ambient noise of the crowd changed. Murmurs turned to shouts. People started running, some away from the sound, others, the morbidly curious, towards it. The old Izuku, the Izuku from an hour ago, would have been sprinting towards the action, his notebook already in hand, his mind alight with analysis and awe. This Izuku, this hollowed-out shell, barely flinched. What's the point? He thought, a bitter, unfamiliar taste in his mouth. Another villain. Another hero will show up. They'll fight. People will cheer. It has nothing to do with me. He kept walking, trying to push through the growing crowd, his only desire to reach the sterile quiet of his bedroom. But as he rounded the corner into the Takoba Municipal Shopping Arcade, he was forced to a halt. The way was blocked. A massive crowd had gathered, phones held aloft, their faces a mixture of fear and excitement. Black smoke billowed from the narrow alleyway, smelling of burnt sugar and sewage. And then he saw it. the villain. It was the same amorphous, sentient sludge that had attacked him earlier, the one All Might had bottled up. It was free. And it had a hostage. A writhing, thrashing form was trapped within the viscous green body, small, contained explosions popping like firecrackers from its hands. Izuku's blood ran cold. The spiky blonde hair. The familiar, desperate rage in the captive's eyes. Kaken. He pushed his way to the front, his breath catching in his throat. The pro-heroes were there. Death Arms was trying to land a punch, but his fists just sank into the sludge with no effect. Kamui Woods was evacuating civilians, his wooden limbs too vulnerable to the spreading fires. The newcomer, Mount Lady, couldn't fit into the narrow alley. They were standing around, a line of brightly colored failures, holding the perimeter but doing nothing to save the victim. His quirk is all about explosions. Combined with the sludge villain's fluid body, it's a terrible matchup for most heroes. Someone in the crowd said, a self-proclaimed expert. Why aren't they doing anything? A woman cried out, her voice frantic. Izuku heard their words, but his mind was already working, the old habits dying hard. The eyes, he thought, his analytical brain kicking into gear against his will. The villain's real body, his eyes, are the only solid part. That has to be the weak point. But they can't get close enough. Kaken's explosions are keeping them at bay. But he's also kicking up so much dust and debris that it's impossible to get a clear shot. He's suffocating. He's creating the very chaos that's preventing his own rescue. He saw it all. The hero's incompetence. The crowd's useless gawking. And Kaken's face, contorted in a silent scream, his eyes pleading for a help he would be too proud to ever ask for. And in that moment, Izuku Midoriya's two broken halves collided. The boy who was told he could never be a hero, and the boy whose soul screamed that a hero was someone who acted. His legs moved before his brain could issue a command. He ducked under the police tape, a sudden, inexplicable gust of wind seeming to push him forward. The world narrowed to a tunnel. The shouts of the heroes, the gasps of the crowd, they all faded away. There was only the monster, the victim, and the 75 meters of pavement between them. What are you doing? A voice in his head screamed. You're quirkless. You'll die. He looks like he needs saving, another, deeper voice whispered back. His mind flashed back to his notebook. Page 25. Kamui Woods. Weakness, fire. Death Arms. Weakness, villains he can't physically touch. He knew these heroes. He knew their limits better than they did, and he knew they were going to let Bakugo die. He wasn't running with a plan. He was running on pure, unadulterated instinct. But as he ran, his analytical mind, his one true gift, didn't shut down. It went into overdrive. He saw the debris, the angle of the explosions, the slight shimmer in the air where the villain's eyes were. He unslung his backpack, his movements fluid and desperate. Kaken! Bakugo's eyes snapped to him for a fraction of a second. A flicker of disbelief, of fury, and of raw primal fear. Izuku swung the heavy bag with all his might, aiming for that shimmer. The backpack, loaded with textbooks, flew true. It slammed squarely into the sludge villain's eye. The monster roared in pain, its concentration wavering for a crucial instant. Its grip on Bakugo loosened just enough. I couldn't just stand there and watch you die. Izuku screamed, his voice raw with tears and adrenaline as he clawed at the sludge, his fingers trying to find purchase, trying to pull his tormentor, his oldest friend, free. Unseen, unheard, and utterly undetected, a silent observer hovered 500 meters above the chaos. It was no bigger than a falcon, its chassis crafted from a matte black, radar-absorbent alloy that bent light around its edges. A series of crystalline lenses, arranged like an insect's compound eye, zoomed in, capturing the scene not in visible light, but in a full spectrum of data, thermal, kinetic, biosignature, and esoteric energy readings. This was a Doom drone, Mark 9. And its master was watching. Inside the opulent, lead-line command center of Castle Doom in Latveria, Victor von Doom sat upon his throne, the world's chaos playing out like a private theater on a series of holographic screens before him. He had been monitoring Japan for weeks. The nation's obsession with heroes and its staggering 80% quirk user population made it a potential powder keg for global stability. The rise of this all-might figure was particularly grating, a gaudy, simplistic brute who preached hope while doing nothing to address the systemic rot that created villains in the first place. The drone's feed was piped directly into his helmet's HUD. He had dismissed the pro-heroes on the scene within seconds of the incident starting. "Log," he commanded, his voice a low, metallic baritone that resonated with absolute authority. Subject: Japanese pro-hero inefficiency analysis. Case study, 77.4. A soft chime acknowledged the command. The hero Death Arms, Doom's voice intoned, devoid of emotion, relies solely on brute kinetic force. Against an amorphous opponent, he is rendered impotent. A first-year student of the Latvian Science Academy could design a containment device more effective. His utility is situational at best, dangerously limited at worst. The drone's view shifted to Kamui Woods. The hero Kamui Woods. His arbor quirk is susceptible to fire, a common byproduct of urban conflict. He prioritizes evacuation over neutralization, a commendable but ultimately flawed strategy. One cannot save the flock by perpetually fleeing the wolf. The wolf must be put down. The view centered on Mount Lady, who was still struggling with the spatial limitations of the alley. The hero Mount Lady. A weapon of mass disruption whose application is limited to open areas. A tactical liability, prone to excessive collateral damage. Her presence here is more for spectacle than for substance. These are not saviors. They are performers, playing to a terrified audience. Doom leaned forward, his gauntlet fingers steepling. He had been about to dismiss the entire affair as yet another example of this chaotic world's failings. Then, the boy had run out of the crowd. The drone's sensors immediately focused on him. The feed was flooded with data. Subject designation, Midoriya Izuku, age 14. Biometrics, height and heart rate, elevated adrenaline and cortisol levels. Standard human physiology, quirk registry status, negative. Doom's interest, which had been at a clinical low, suddenly sharpened. Quirkless, he watched as the boy, a non-entity in this world of gods and monsters, charged into a situation that had paralyzed so-called professionals. It was suicidal. It was foolish. It was magnificent. Log, append analysis, Doom commanded, his voice holding a new, sharper edge. A variable has been introduced. Subject, Izuku Midoriya. Quirkless, he watched the boy throw his backpack. It was not a random act of desperation. The drone's trajectory analysis confirmed it in a microsecond. The arc was precise. The target, the villain's primary sensory organ, was a logical choice. The boy had analyzed the situation, identified a weakness, and executed a plan, all while under extreme duress. Note, Doom continued, his gaze fixed on the hologram of Izuku clawing at the sludge. The subject displays tactical acumen and analytical abilities that far surpassed the accredited heroes on scene. He processed the variables, enemy physiology, environmental hazards, hostage status, and acted decisively while the state-sanctioned agents hesitated. He saw the boy screaming, his face a mask of frantic determination. He was trying to create an airway for the explosive hostage, trying to dig him out. It was a futile gesture, but the will behind it, that was anything but futile. It was a will of pure, unrefined adamantium. A will to defy a hopeless situation, to impose his desire for salvation onto a reality that screamed it was impossible. In that moment, Victor von Doom did not see a crying, pathetic child. He saw a diamond in the rough. He saw a mind uncorrupted by the genetic arrogance of a quirk. He saw a heroic spirit untainted by the desire for fame and fortune that drove the pro-hero industry. He saw a raw, untamed potential of a kind he had not witnessed in decades. All Might arrived, of course, in a storm of bluster and ridiculous bravado. He defeated the villain with a single, weather-altering punch. The crowd roared. The media swarmed. The symbol of peace had saved the day. Doom scoffed, a quiet, contemptuous sound inside his helmet. The brute arrives to clean up the mess his own incompetence created. He scatters the villain across the block, requiring a dozen lesser men to literally scrape him into a containment unit. Inefficient. Messy. Theatrics over substance, as always. The drone remained focused on Izuku. He was being scolded. The heroes he had just shown up were wagging their fingers at him, berating him for his recklessness. The explosive boy he had tried to save was screaming at him, pride masking his terror. The world, in its infinite stupidity, was punishing the only person who had demonstrated true heroism on that street. Log final entry, Doom commanded, rising from his throne. The society that praises the blundering giant and scorns the brave, intelligent child is a society on the brink of collapse. It is a world that does not deserve saviors. It requires a ruler. He paused, the image of Izuku's tear-streaked, determined face frozen on the main screen. The subject, Izuku Midoriya, possesses the two qualities I have found most lacking in this era, a selfless will and a keen intellect. Under my tutelage, that will can be forged. That intellect can be honed. He is not a successor for this broken system of heroes. He is a potential successor for Doom. He raised a gauntlet hand. Dispatch the emissary. Approach the boy tonight. He is at his nadir. His dreams have been shattered. His spirit is malleable. Present him with a new dream. A better dream. The dream of a world remade in a logical, orderly image. The dream of Doom. The walk home was worse than the walk from the rooftop. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a profound, soul-crushing humiliation. He had been praised by no one, scorned by all. Even Kaken, after screaming that he hadn't needed saving, had stalked off without a word of thanks. Izuku's key fumbled in the lock of his apartment door. He managed to slip inside without his mother seeing him, murmuring something about being tired and heading straight to his room. He didn't turn on the lights. He just collapsed onto his bed, the all-might merchandise covering his walls seeming to mock him in the darkness. He had been useless on the rooftop. He had been useless in the alley. He had rushed in, and for what? To be a momentary distraction. To be told he was a reckless fool. All Might had been right. He wasn't a hero. He was a liability. The weight of the day was absolute. He didn't eat. He didn't change. He just lay there, staring at his ceiling, a hollow ache where his heart should be. This, he thought, was the end. The end of the dream. Tomorrow, he would wake up and be just Izuku Midoriya, the quirkless nobody. And the day after. And for the rest of his life. The thought was so bleak it felt like drowning. Sometime after midnight, a strange, low hum began to permeate the room. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate in his bones, a clean, electrical thrum unlike any appliance he knew. He sat up, his eyes scanning the darkness. The curtains of his window were gently swaying, though it was closed. A shadow detached itself from the deeper shadows of the corner of his room. Izuku's breath hitched. His heart hammered against his ribs. A villain? Here? But there was no malice in the air, only a profound and unnerving stillness. The figure stepped into a sliver of moonlight filtering through the window. It wasn't a person. It was a machine. A robot, easily 7 feet tall, with a gleaming chrome body reminiscent of a medieval suit of armor. A dark green tunic and cloak were draped over its powerful frame, clasped at the neck by 2 gold medallions. But it was the face that held him captive. A cold, impassive steel mask, with rivets tracing a permanent, grim expression. It was humanoid, yet utterly inhuman. Izuku Midoriya, the robot spoke. Its voice was a synthesized baritone, perfectly modulated, without inflection or emotion. It was the voice of a machine, yet it carried an undeniable weight of authority. I am an emissary of the Latverian sovereign. You need not be alarmed. I am not here to harm you. Izuku was frozen, half in terror, half in sheer, unadulterated shock. Latveria? The small, isolationist Eastern European nation? He knew of it, of course. It was famous for 2 things, its complete lack of crime or poverty, and its enigmatic, iron-fisted ruler, a man the world's media painted as a supervillain but whose people reportedly revered as a savior. A man named Dr. Doom. How did you get in here? Izuku stammered, his mind struggling to catch up. Your conventional security measures are trivial, the Doombot stated, as if discussing the weather. But that is not the matter at hand. My master, Dr. Victor von Doom, observed your actions today, both at the Takoba Municipal Shopping Arcade, and on the rooftop with the oaf known as All Might. Izuku flinched as if struck. The robot knew. It knew everything. My master is unimpressed with the state of your society, the emissary continued, its glowing red optics fixed on him. He sees a world drowning in chaos, governed by fools, and protected by incompetent, self-aggrandizing peacocks who call themselves heroes. He has observed your so-called symbol of peace and found him to be a hollow icon, a reactive force for temporary stability who does nothing to address the fundamental equations of human suffering. The robot's words were cold, clinical, and terrifyingly resonant with the bitter thoughts that had been festering in Izuku's own mind. And then, the emissary said, taking a silent, gliding step closer, my master observed you. A boy with no power, no station, and no hope. A boy who was told by his idol that he was worthless. And yet, when faced with a crisis that paralyzed those with immense power, you acted. You analyzed. You sacrificed your own safety not for glory, not for reward, but because your intrinsic nature dictated that you must. My master does not believe in miracles or fate. He believes in will, and your will, Izuku Midoriya, is an anomaly of profound interest. Izuku could only stare, his mouth dry. Your potential is wasted here, the robot declared. It is a flicker of brilliance in an ocean of mediocrity. You dream of being a hero, of saving people. A noble, if naive, ambition. What if I told you there was a path to save not just a few people from a single villain, but to save all of humanity from itself? From a panel in the Doombot's chest, a soft blue light emanated. A complex, three-dimensional hologram bloomed in the center of Izuku's small room, pushing aside the shadows. It was a city. But it was unlike any city Izuku had ever seen. The architecture was a seamless blend of Gothic stonework and hyper-advanced technology. The streets were immaculately clean. There were no police, because there was no crime. Holographic screens showed smiling citizens, healthy and well-fed, engaged in art, science, and education. This is Darmstadt, the capital of Latveria, the emissary's voice explained as the scene shifted. It showed a hospital where advanced robotic surgeons performed complex procedures for free. It showed a university where children, from the moment they could walk, were given a personalized education designed to maximize their intellectual potential. It showed power plants that ran on clean, limitless energy, and fields harvested by automated drones, producing a surplus of food for every citizen. In Latveria, there is no hunger. There is no disease that our science cannot cure. There is no homelessness. There is no crime. There is no villainy, because the societal conditions that breed it, poverty, ignorance, desperation, have been eliminated by logical design. It is a nation of perfect order. A nation of perfect peace. This is what one man's will has accomplished. The hologram then shifted, showing a jarring juxtaposition, the fiery, debris-strewn alleyway from earlier that day. This is your world, the emissary stated. Chaos. Inefficiency. A system that waits for disasters to happen and then sends glorified celebrities to punch the problem, leaving the root cause to fester. The hero-villain cycle is a self-perpetuating engine of destruction, and the people you wish to save are its fuel. You saved that boy today, but what of tomorrow? Another villain will rise. More people will be endangered. The cycle will continue. This is the fundamental flaw of reactive heroism. The hologram of the alley faded, leaving only the calm, orderly streets of Darmstadt. My master does not react. He anticipates. He calculates. He builds. He rules. He has brought salvation to his people through absolute order, and now, he believes the time has come to offer that same salvation to the world. The Doombot took another step forward. Its metal hand, surprisingly slender and articulated, reached out, not in a threatening gesture, but as if to offer something. Dr. Doom sees in you a worthy vessel for his legacy. He sees your analytical mind, your unbreakable will, and your pure, uncorrupted desire to save others. He believes that these qualities, when tempered with his knowledge, his power, and his philosophy, can create a force for change this world has never seen. He wants me to be a villain? Izuku whispered, the word tasting like ash. The words hero and villain are childish labels for a complex world, the emissary countered instantly. Is a surgeon a villain for cutting a man open to remove a tumor? Is a leader a villain for making a hard choice that sacrifices a few to save millions? My master is not offering you a mask and a life of petty crime. He is offering you an education. An ascension. He will teach you science beyond this nation's understanding. He will instruct you in the mystic arts, a power that quirks cannot replicate or erase. He will give you the tools to build, to command, to control. He does not offer you a borrowed quirk, passed down like a family heirloom. He offers you the chance to forge your own power, built upon the foundation of your own intellect and will. The offer hung in the air, immense and terrifying. It was a complete refutation of everything Izuku had ever believed. Heroes saved people with a smile. They inspired hope. This was a promise of salvation through cold, hard logic. Through control. Through an iron fist and a velvet glove. It was the antithesis of all might. And yet, his analytical mind, the part of him that wasn't a hero fanboy, couldn't find a flaw in the robot's logic. The heroes had been incompetent. The system was reactive. People did keep suffering. He thought of his mother, always worrying. He thought of the people trapped in the chaos today. Doom's way, as chilling as it was, promised an end to all of that. No more fear. No more chaos. Only peace. A managed, enforced peace. His heart, the one that had worshipped heroes his entire life, screamed in protest. This is wrong. This is the path of a tyrant. But his brain, the brain that had just been told it was worthless by the world's greatest hero, whispered back. But is he wrong? A smile is a hollow comfort to a world in flames, Izuku Midoriya, the emissary said, as if reading his thoughts. True salvation is not a feeling. It is a state of being. It is a system. It is order. Izuku looked around his room, at the smiling face of All Might on his posters. A lie. A beautiful, powerful, inspiring lie. The man was a shadow of himself, and his system was failing. Hope hadn't saved Kaken. A desperate, quirkless boy with a backpack had, if only for a moment. What was his alternative? To accept his fate? To go to a normal high school, get a normal job, and watch the world burn on television, knowing he was powerless to stop it. The thought was unbearable. It was a death of 1,000 cuts, a slow fading into irrelevant obscurity. Doom was offering him relevance. He was offering him power. He was offering him a purpose. I can't be a villain, he said, his voice trembling. It was the last stand of his old dream. You will not be a villain, the emissary corrected him. You will be a sovereign. You will be a savior. The world will not understand at first. They will fear you. They will call you a tyrant. But when their children are safe, when their bellies are full, when the chaos ceases and the world knows an age of peace and prosperity unlike any in its history, they will call you a god. As they do my master in Latveria. The robot retracted its hand. The choice is yours. Remain here, a footnote in a history of failure. Or come to Latveria. Accept the tutelage of the most brilliant mind on this planet. Become the man who will finally save the world from itself. My master does not demand an immediate, permanent vow. He offers a trial. Come. Learn. See the truth for yourself. If, after you have seen what Doom can do, you still believe the path of the smiling buffoons is the correct one, you will be returned. A trial. A chance to see. It wasn't an unbreakable vow. It was a logical next step. An experiment. And Izuku Midoriya, for all his hero worship, was a creature of logic and analysis. He looked at the hologram of Doomstadt, a city of perfect order. He looked at the All Might poster on his wall, a symbol of a hope that had failed him. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the first breath of a new life. The boy who wanted to be a hero was dying. In his place, something else, something harder and colder, was beginning to form. He began, his voice barely a whisper. He cleared his throat and spoke again, with a resolve that surprised even himself. I will accept the trial. The red optics of the Doombot seemed to gleam. A wise decision. The first of many. Preparations will be made. You will leave a note for your mother. Tell her you have been accepted into a prestigious, overseas academy for gifted students. A transport will arrive for you before dawn. Be ready. The emissary turned, its cloak swirling around it. It didn't walk to the window. It simply dissolved into the shadows from which it came, the low hum fading until the only sound in the room was the frantic beating of Izuku's own heart. He was alone again. But everything had changed. The path to Uehai, the road to becoming the next All Might, had crumbled into dust. A new path had opened before him, a dark, uncertain road of iron, science, and sorcery. It was a path that led not to the light of public adoration, but to the shadows of a throne. A path that led to Latveria, a path that led to doom. The transport was a specter in the pre-dawn gloom. It had descended without a sound, its matte black hull seeming to drink the faint city light, displacing the air with the silent, predatory grace of an owl. There were no windows, no visible engines, no markings of any kind. It was a sterile, featureless void that had settled in the middle of his quiet residential street. Izuku clutched the single strap of his new, plain black backpack, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. Inside the bag were a few changes of clothes, toiletries, and a single, fresh notebook. He had left everything else behind. His room, a shrine to a god who had failed him, felt like a stranger's tomb as he'd left it. He had paused at the door, looking back at the posters of All Might's beaming, confident face. For a moment, a wave of profound grief had washed over him, a mourning for the simple, naive boy he used to be. Then, he had closed the door, shutting that part of his life away. The note on the kitchen table had been the hardest part. The lie felt like acid on his tongue even as he'd written it. "Mom, I've been accepted into a special program overseas. It's a huge opportunity. I'll be safe. I'll make you proud." He had stared at the words until they blurred, his hand shaking. This was his first act as a student of doom, deception for the sake of a greater good. It left a bitter taste in his mouth. The transport's ramp lowered with a barely audible hiss. The interior was as stark as the exterior, a single, padded bench along one wall, the air smelling of ozone and sterilized metal. There was no pilot visible. As soon as he stepped inside, the ramp retracted, sealing him in near total darkness, save for a few soft, recessed lights on the floor. He sat down, the synthetic material of the bench cool against his legs. There was no jolt, no roar of engines. Just a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in gravity that told him they were ascending. He was leaving Japan. He was leaving his entire world behind. The journey was long and silent, giving him far too much time to think. He replayed the emissary's words, the holographic images of Doomstat, the memory of All Might's skeletal face. Had he made a mistake? Was this a trap? Was he trading one kind of powerlessness for another, becoming a pawn in a supervillain's game? But every time the doubt crept in, the cold logic of the emissary's argument pushed it back. The hero-villain cycle is a self-perpetuating engine of destruction. He had seen it with his own eyes. This was a chance to break the machine, not just be another cog in it. After what felt like a lifetime, the subtle pressure of deceleration began. A soft chime echoed through the cabin, and with another hiss, the ramp lowered. Izuku's first breath of Latverian air was a shock. It was crisp and clean, smelling of pine and damp earth and a faint, metallic tang of ionized air. He stepped out onto a wide, stone platform overlooking a verdant, rolling valley. In the distance, quaint villages with timber-framed houses nestled in the folds of the hills, smoke curling lazily from their chimneys. It was pastoral, almost like a scene from a fairy tale. But the fairy tale was threaded with steel. A sleek, silent monorail shot across the valley on an almost invisible track, connecting one of the villages to the mountain range on the horizon. High above, automated agricultural drones, shaped like metallic dragonflies, moved in perfect formation over vast, geometric fields, tending to crops with beams of focused light, and dominating the entire landscape. Built into the very heart of the largest mountain, was his destination, Castle Doom. It was a breathtaking, terrifying monument to a singular will. It was not merely a castle, it was a fusion of ancient Gothic nightmare and futuristic industrial perfection. Soaring stone spires that scraped the clouds were interwoven with massive energy conduits that pulsed with a faint blue light. Gargoyles with glowing red eyes perched on the battlements, and Izuku's analytical mind immediately recognized them not as sculptures, but as sophisticated, multi-barreled point defense turrets. A waterfall cascaded down the mountain face, disappearing into a massive intake valve that hummed with the contained power of a star. This was a fortress, a laboratory, a palace, and a power plant. It was the heart of Latveria, and the heart of its master. The emissary robot, or one identical to it, stood waiting for him on the platform. "Welcome to Latveria, Izuku Midoriya," it said in its flat, synthesized voice. "The master awaits you in the throne room." The journey into the castle was a silent one, a calculated display of power and precision. They walked through cavernous halls of polished black marble, the only sound the faint hum of energy, and the near-silent footsteps of his guide. Doombots, identical to the emissary, patrolled the corridors, their movements synchronized and purposeful. There were no human guards. There was no need. The castle itself was the ultimate security system. They finally arrived at a set of immense, ornate doors wrought from steel and obsidian. They swung open without a sound, revealing the throne room. The chamber was vast, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadow. Stained glass windows, depicting scenes not of saints and angels but of scientific discovery and military conquest, cast long, colored shafts of light across the floor. At the far end of the hall, on a raised dais, was a throne of chrome and iron, and seated upon it was Dr. Victor von Doom. He was exactly as the world's intelligence agencies depicted him, yet infinitely more imposing in person. The gleaming, riveted iron mask was a terrifyingly blank canvas, betraying no emotion. The emerald green cloak and tunic were the robes of a monarch. The armored gauntlets rested on the arms of the throne, crackling with a faint, barely contained energy. He did not move. He did not speak. He simply watched as Izuku, a small, trembling 14-year-old boy in a school uniform, walked the long distance across the marble floor. Izuku stopped 10 paces from the dais, his throat suddenly dry. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, a palpable force pressing down on him. He felt like an insect under a microscope. "You are small." Doom's voice finally boomed, the metallic timbre echoing through the hall. It was not the synthesized voice of the bot. It was a human voice, amplified and distorted by the helmet, rich with arrogance and intellect. "You carry the stench of a society that prizes mediocrity and fears greatness. Look at you. Trembling. Afraid. Your world has taught you that this is your natural state." He gestured dismissively with a gauntlet hand. "Your quirklessness. They see it as a deficiency. A broken part in an otherwise functional machine. They are fools. A vessel that is already full cannot be taught. You are not broken. You are a blank slate, unburdened by the genetic lottery that grants power without demanding wisdom. That is a rare and valuable thing." Doom leaned forward slightly, the movement conveying a terrifying intensity. "You stand here because I saw in you a flicker of something that has been absent from this world for too long, a will that defies reality. You charged a monster you could not possibly defeat because your spirit demanded it. That is the raw material of greatness. Everything else, your fear, your weakness, your pathetic hero worship, is dross that must be burned away. I will provide the crucible. It is up to you to survive the fire." He rose from his throne. The sheer presence of him was overwhelming. He was a giant of metal and will. "Your training begins now," Doom declared. "You will shed the skin of Izuku Midoriya, the helpless victim. You will be reforged. Here, in my domain, you will learn the 3 pillars upon which all true power is built: science, sorcery, and statecraft. You will master the laws of the universe, learn to rewrite them, and finally, apply them to the flawed chaos of humanity. You are no longer a spectator. You are my student, and the price of my tutelage is everything you are." Izuku could only nod, his mind reeling. The crucible was waiting. The first pillar, science engineering. Izuku's new classroom was a laboratory that dwarfed any university or corporate R&D facility he could have imagined. Cavernous and immaculate, it hummed with the quiet power of quantum computers and glowed with the light of holographic schematics that floated in the air like ghostly blueprints. Nanoforges and molecular assemblers lined one wall, capable of constructing anything from a microchip to a battle axe, atom by atom. His first lesson was not practical. It was an intellectual deluge. For 3 months, he did nothing but study. He was given access to Doom's personal library, a data bank containing the whole of human knowledge and a significant amount of knowledge that was exclusively Doom's. He devoured texts on quantum mechanics, theoretical physics, advanced robotics, cybernetics, materials science, and artificial intelligence programming. His muttering habit, once a source of ridicule, became his greatest tool. He would pace the lab for hours, muttering complex equations, debating theoretical models with himself, his mind racing to connect disparate fields of study. Doom would observe him silently, sometimes for hours on end, from a console in the corner of the lab. He rarely intervened, only providing a new data set or a complex problem when Izuku reached a plateau. Your society's education system is designed to create compliant workers, not innovators, Doom stated one evening, as Izuku wrestled with the principles of creating a stable miniature fusion reactor. It teaches you what to think, not how to think. You will learn to derive the answers from first principles. Memorization is for parrots. Understanding is for rulers. After the theoretical phase came the practical. His first task was to build a simple power cell capable of energizing a Doom bot for 1 hour. He spent a week meticulously designing it, crafting the components in the nanoforge, and assembling the casing. He followed the schematics he'd developed perfectly. When he activated it, it glowed for a brilliant 3 seconds before shorting out with a shower of sparks. He stared at the smoking husk, a familiar feeling of failure washing over him. Analyze! Doom's voice commanded from behind him. He hadn't even heard him enter. Your calculations were flawless. Your assembly was precise. Yet you failed. Why? Izuku ran the diagnostics, his mind racing. I don't know. The materials should have held. The energy transfer was within theoretical limits. You accounted for the laws of physics, Doom said, picking up the ruined cell with a gauntlet hand. But you did not account for the nature of the energy itself. You treated it as a simple current. The power that animates my creations is not so simple. It is tinged with other properties. It has a will. Your design tried to contain it. You must learn to persuade it. It was the first time Doom had hinted that his science was not purely scientific. Izuku spent another week redesigning the cell, not as a simple battery, but as a vessel, incorporating geometric patterns and material alloys that felt more like art than engineering. This time, when he activated it, the cell hummed with a stable, soft blue light. Good, was all Doom said. From there, the tasks grew in complexity. He built reconnaissance drones, learned to code his own tactical AI, and designed armor plating that could withstand artillery fire. His analytical mind, which had once been dedicated to deconstructing heroes' quirks, was now focused on creation. He was learning to build the power he had always lacked, with his own 2 hands and his own mind. He was becoming a craftsman of the impossible. The second pillar, the mystic arts. If the laboratory was a sterile temple of logic, the observatory at the highest peak of Castle Doom was a sanctuary of the sublime and terrifying. The domed ceiling was a single, vast lens of enchanted crystal that showed not the sky, but the swirling, chaotic heart of the cosmos. Ancient tomes bound in strange, leathery hides lined the walls, their pages filled with symbols that seemed to squirm at the edge of his vision. The air here was heavy, ancient, and thrummed with an energy that had nothing to do with electricity. Science is the art of understanding the cage of reality, Doom explained, standing before a swirling vortex of purple energy he had summoned in the center of the room. Magic is the art of finding the key. Izuku's introduction to sorcery was not a lesson. It was an ordeal. The first step is to silence your mind, Doom instructed. Your thoughts are a constant storm of noise, analysis, fear, memory, doubt. This is the chatter of a lesser being. A sorcerer's mind must be a silent, placid lake, so that his will can be the single stone that creates the ripple. For weeks, Izuku did nothing but meditate. He sat cross-legged on the cold stone floor, trying to empty his mind, but it was a raging torrent. The faces of his mother, All Might, and Kaken swam before his eyes. The taunts of his childhood echoed in his ears. Every failure, every humiliation, was a constant, screaming distraction. You are failing, Doom stated during one session, his voice cutting through Izuku's concentration. You are trying to suppress the noise. You cannot! You must acknowledge it, understand it, and then release it. Your past is an anchor. cut the rope. The process was agonizing. He was forced to confront every painful memory, every insecurity that had defined him. He had to accept his quirkless nature not as a source of shame, but as a simple fact. He had to accept All Might's rejection not as a personal failing, but as the opinion of a limited man. He had to deconstruct his own identity, piece by painful piece. He began to suffer from splitting headaches. His nose would bleed without warning. At night, he was plagued by nightmares of impossible geometry and whispering voices from the void. This was the price of opening one's mind to the fundamental forces of the universe. His breakthrough came, not in a flash of insight, but in a moment of utter exhaustion. After a solid day of failed meditation, he had simply given up. He wasn't trying to silence his mind anymore. He was just there. Empty. Defeated. And in that perfect stillness of despair, he felt it. A connection. A subtle, thrumming web of energy that connected everything in the room, the stone, the air, the light from the cosmos himself. He focused on a single candle burning on a nearby sconce. He didn't try to command it. He simply extended his newfound awareness towards it, and willed it to obey. The flame flickered, then bent at a sharp 90-degree angle, as if in a strong wind, though the air in the room was perfectly still. He opened his eyes, a gasp escaping his lips. "You have taken the first step," Doom's voice echoed from the shadows. "You have learned that your will is a tangible force. Now you will learn to shape it." His subsequent lessons were more practical. He learned to draw runes of power in the air, creating shimmering shields of green energy that could deflect physical objects. He learned to channel his will into projections of raw concussive force, small at first, but growing in potency. He was taught scrying, the art of using a bowl of sanctified water to peer across vast distances, a process that was as mentally draining as it was effective. Magic did not come easily to him. Unlike science, it was not purely logical. It was an art of emotion and intent, and his were still in turmoil. But his determination, the same stubborn refusal to quit that had defined his entire life, served him well. He was slowly, painfully, adding the arcane to his arsenal. The third pillar, statecraft philosophy. This was the hardest part of his education. The most painful. Doom's classroom for this subject was the throne room itself, or sometimes, the castle's primary command center, a vast chamber where one wall was a holographic map of the entire planet, displaying geopolitical tensions, economic data, and military deployments in real time. "A ruler who seeks to be loved is a fool," Doom began their first lesson. "Love is fickle. It is an emotion, and emotions are the enemy of reason. A ruler must be respected, feared, when necessary, but above all, he must be effective. The well-being of the state is the only moral imperative. The sentiment of the ruler is irrelevant. Only the result matters." To teach this, Doom did not use books. He used a highly advanced simulation chamber. Izuku would be placed in a scenario and forced to make a choice. The scenarios were brutal, designed to systematically dismantle his black and white view of heroism. The first was the trolley problem, scaled up to a national crisis. A highly contagious, bioengineered plague has been released in a remote Latverian border village of 500 souls, Doom's voice explained as the holographic scenario materialized around Izuku. It is 100% fatal. It has an incubation period of 24 hours, after which it becomes airborne. You have 3 options. 3 holographic panels appeared before him. 1. Enforce a perfect quarantine, deploy a medical and military blockade. No one gets in or out. Chance of success, 60%. If it fails, the plague spreads to the entire nation of 10 million. 2. Send medical aid, attempt to find a cure on site. This is the most compassionate option. It will be seen favorably by the people. Chance of success, less than 5%. The exposure of medical personnel almost guarantees a wider outbreak. 3. Sterilize the area. Use an orbital kinetic weapon to obliterate the village and a 5-mile radius around it. The 500 inhabitants will be killed instantly. Chance of success in containing the plague, 100%. Izuku felt sick. There has to be another way, he stammered. We can try to evacuate the healthy, find a cure faster. There are no other options, Doom cut him off. There is no third way in a true crisis. The time for ingenuity is before the disaster, not during. This is the reality of leadership. Choose. Izuku's hands trembled. His every heroic instinct screamed at him to choose option 1, or even 2. To save everyone. To not sacrifice anyone. I choose the quarantine. We have to try to save them. Very well, Doom said. Run the simulation. The holographic scene fast-forwarded. He watched in horror as the quarantine was implemented. Riots broke out in the village. A desperate family tried to break the line and was gunned down. Then, a single infected bird flew over the blockade. It was all it took. The simulation map turned from green to a sickening red as the plague spread from town to town. The final death toll appeared before his eyes in stark, crimson letters. 9,452,187. Your compassion has resulted in the annihilation of your people, Doom's voice intoned, cold, and flat. Your desire to be a hero made you a mass murderer. Now watch. The simulation reset. This time, Doom himself made the choice. The third option was selected. Izuku watched, his stomach churning, as a colossal rod of tungsten descended from the heavens. The village, the mountainside, everything was vaporized in a silent, blinding flash of light. The death toll appeared, 500. The nation was saved. I took no pleasure in this act, Doom stated, as the simulation faded. But I did not hesitate. Because a true ruler serves the nation, not his own conscience. The lives of 500, or the lives of 10 million. The equation is simple. Your sentimentality, your need to find a perfect solution where none exists, is your greatest weakness. It is the weakness of all so-called heroes. They would rather risk the world than bloody their own hands. I will risk anything, sacrifice anyone, to ensure the survival and prosperity of my people. That is the will of Doom. Izuku was on his knees, breathing heavily, the phantom screams of the millions he had condemned echoing in his ears. He had never felt so broken. This was the true crucible. It was a place where good intentions led to an apocalypse, and ruthless, brutal logic was the only path to salvation. His days blurred into a grueling, relentless cycle of study, creation, meditation, and agonizing moral deconstruction. He argued with Doom constantly, desperately clinging to the remnants of his old self. This weapon is too destructive, he'd protest, holding up the schematics for a sonic cannon. Its purpose is to end conflicts with overwhelming force, minimizing casualties on both sides, Doom would counter. A quick, decisive victory is more merciful than a prolonged war of attrition. This spell, it manipulates a person's mind. It's wrong. Is it more wrong than allowing that person to detonate a bomb in a crowded city square? I am giving you the tools to prevent disaster, not just react to it. Control is not inherently evil, child. It is a tool, like any other. Doom never lost his patience. He simply countered every one of Izuku's emotional, idealistic arguments with cold, irrefutable logic. He was deconstructing Izuku's worldview brick by brick, and rebuilding it on a foundation of iron-willed pragmatism. Izuku's spirit wasn't breaking. It was being tempered. The soft, malleable iron of his hope was being folded and hammered in the fire of Doom's philosophy, becoming something harder, sharper. He was learning to suppress his immediate emotional response, to push past the horror and see the tactical and strategic realities of a situation. He was learning to think not like a hero, but like a king. A full year passed. The boy who had arrived in Latveria was gone. His frame had filled out, his posture was no longer a perpetual slouch but was straight and confident. His eyes, once wide and full of hero worship, were now sharp, analytical, and shadowed with the weight of the terrible lessons he had learned. One afternoon, Doom summoned him to the castle's main training hall, a cavernous room large enough to house a starship. In the center stood a combat model Doombot, its armor plating thicker, its optics a menacing crimson. Your preliminary training is complete, Doom announced from an observation balcony above. It is time for your examination. Your objective, disable the Sentinel. Do not destroy it. A ruler knows the value of restraint. Begin. The Doombot's arm transformed into a plasma cannon and fired. The Izuku of a year ago would have panicked, frozen, and died. This Izuku moved with an unnatural calm. A shimmering green shield, a rune of eldritch origin, flared into existence before him, deflecting the plasma bolt into the ceiling. As the bot charged, he analyzed its gait, its weight distribution, the faint hum of its primary servomotors. His mind was a whirlwind of calculations. Left knee actuator has a microsecond lag, T600 series chassis. Vulnerable to high-frequency resonance at the primary power conduit along the spine. He slid to the side, his hand glowing with energy. He didn't fire a blast of raw force. Instead, he shaped his will, projecting a focused, invisible wave of magical energy that struck the floor, superheating the stone into a patch of molten slag. The Doombot's foot sank into it, throwing it off balance. In that instant of opportunity, Izuku lunged. He wasn't aiming for the head or chest. He ran up the bot's outstretched arm, his movements fluid and precise. A small, sleek device he had built himself, a plasma projector, was mounted on his gauntlet. He slammed his palm against the bot's back, directly over the spinal conduit, and fired a single, controlled burst. The Doombot seized up, every light on its body flickering and dying. It crashed to the floor, inert and completely silent. The entire fight had lasted less than 10 seconds. Izuku stood over the disabled machine, his breathing even, his heart rate barely elevated. He had seamlessly blended the three pillars, a magical defense, a scientific analysis, and a ruthlessly efficient, tactical takedown. A slow, deliberate clap echoed from the balcony. He looked up to see Doom standing at the railing. Acceptable, was all he said, the word carrying the weight of the highest possible praise. You have forged the tools. Now you must learn to wield them in the world of fools that you have left behind. Your crucible here is over. Your true test begins. Doom's masked face turned towards him. There is an institution in Japan. Yui-Hai. A ridiculous factory for producing garish, incompetent heroes. You will enroll. You will pass their entrance exam and take your place among their students. Izuku was momentarily stunned. Yui? Why? What purpose does that serve? It serves many, Doom replied. You will observe the next generation of this world's protectors, analyze their strengths, and catalog their weaknesses. You will study the nexus of power that is All Might and his ridiculous institution. But most importantly, you will make a declaration. You will show them a new kind of power, one that is not born from a genetic accident. You will show them the power of a mind and a will forged in fire. They will be in awe of you. They will fear you, and they will learn that the age of smiling heroes is over. Doom's gaze seemed to pierce right through him. You will go not as a hero in training. You will go as my vanguard. My sovereign. Go, and let the world know that a new order is coming. Let them know the will of Doom. The return to Japan was a jarring sensory assault. After a year in the clean, ordered, and almost silent efficiency of Latveria, the chaotic symphony of Muzidifu was deafening. The air, thick with humidity and a million competing smells, felt heavy in Izuku's lungs. The transport, as silent and undetectable as before, had set him down in a discreet, abandoned warehouse on the city's industrial fringe. As the ramp lowered, he took his first step back into his old world, and for the first time, saw it through the eyes of his new master. He saw not a vibrant metropolis, but a sprawling, inefficient system on the verge of collapse. He saw the tangled mess of overhead power lines and thought of Latveria's subterranean fusion grid. He saw the garish billboards advertising hero merchandise, and saw a cult of personality distracting the masses from their systemic insecurity. He saw the crumbling infrastructure and the hurried, anxious faces of the populace, and he saw a society that desperately needed a firmer hand. He was no longer just Izuku Midoriya. That boy was a ghost, a collection of memories he had been forced to analyze and discard in the crucible. Now, he was Doom's apprentice, and he was clad in the instruments of that apprenticeship. He wore no school uniform. He was encased in the Sovereign Mark I, the prototype suit of armor he had spent the last 6 months of his life designing and building under Doom's unforgiving tutelage. It was a masterpiece of science and a vessel of sorcery. The primary plating was a lightweight but impossibly durable chromium steel alloy, colored a deep, forest green in homage to his master's cloak. Secondary plating on his limbs and torso was a matte, gunmetal gray. It was sleek, ergonomic, and built for swift, precise lethality. There were no bulky components. The fusion power core was the size of his fist and sat flush against his spine, and the repulsor lifts in his boots and gauntlets were seamlessly integrated into the armor's design. The most striking feature was the helmet. It sealed around his head with a faint hiss, the internal displays flickering to life. The faceplate was a polished, unyielding silver, utterly featureless save for two faintly glowing green optic sensors. It was a mask, just like his master's, designed to reflect the world but reveal nothing of the man within. A Neuralink interface connected his thoughts directly to the armor systems, making it less a suit he wore and more a second skin. Your mission is threefold. Doom's voice echoed in his memory, a final instruction before his departure. Observe their methods. Analyze their weaknesses. And make a declaration of your superiority. You are not there to make friends. You are there to establish a new paradigm of power. Izuku flexed his gauntlet fingers. The delicate servomotors whirred almost silently. He was ready. The walk from the warehouse district to the towering campus of UA High was a study in controlled presence. The citizens of Muzurifu, so accustomed to the sight of colorful heroes in spandex, didn't know what to make of him. He moved with a purpose and economy of motion that was unnerving. People gave him a wide berth, their whispers following him like a wake. Is that a new hero? A villain? What's with the armor? He ignored them all. Their opinions were irrelevant data points. He arrived at the massive gates of UA just as the bulk of the other examinees were flooding in. They were a cacophony of nervous energy, a sea of middle school uniforms and anxious chatter. They bragged about their quirks, sized each other up, and radiated a desperate, youthful desire for validation. Izuku stood apart from them, a silent, armored monolith in a crowd of jittery children. His stillness was more intimidating than any boast. DKU? The voice was a familiar, furious explosion. Izuku turned his head slowly, the helmet's motors making a soft, hydraulic sound. Katsuki Bakugo stood there, his red eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and incandescent rage. He was pointing, his hand trembling slightly. What the hell are you doing here? Bakugo snarled, stalking towards him. The crowd instinctively parted around his aggressive energy. And what the hell is that stupid tin suit? You're quirkless. You're less than nothing. You finally get it through your thick skull that you can't be a hero, so you decide to show up in a goddamn costume? Did you have a psychotic break, you useless nerd? The Izuku of old would have flinched, stammered, and probably burst into tears. This Izuku simply stood his ground, his posture unchanged. His internal sensors analyzed Bakugo's stance, his elevated heart rate, the micro-expressions of fury and underlying shock. Katsuki, Izuku said. His voice, filtered through the helmet's external speaker, was calm, level, and devoid of any emotion. It was not the voice Bakugo knew. It was the voice of a stranger, the deliberate use of his given name, instead of the childhood nickname. Kaken was a clear, calculated severance of their past. Bakugo recoiled as if slapped. What did you call me? Your posture is overly aggressive, broadcasting your intent. Izuku continued, his tone that of a professor dissecting a lab specimen. Your reliance on your quirk has made your foundational combat stance predictable. You lead with your right, telegraphing your explosive attacks. Your emotional state is a tactical liability. In a real conflict, you would be neutralized in seconds. Each word was a precise, surgical strike against Bakugo's ego. He wasn't insulting him. He was simply stating facts as his analysis dictated. Bakugo's face contorted, a snarl twisting his lips. I'll kill you! He lunged, his right hand already sparking with tiny explosions. Izuku didn't move to block. He didn't even raise his hands. Instead, the repulsor on his left gauntlet emitted a barely visible, shimmering wave of kinetic energy. It wasn't an attack. It was a calibrated low-power pulse. It struck Bakugo in the chest, not with enough force to harm him, but with enough to disrupt his momentum completely. He stumbled to a halt, his lunge broken, his feet tangled. He looked down at his chest, then back at Izuku, his rage momentarily replaced by confusion. Do not waste my time, Izuku said, his voice flat and final. He then turned and walked toward the UA building, leaving a stunned and seething Bakugo in his wake. He had not won a fight. He had demonstrated that a fight was beneath him. The declaration had begun. The written portion of the exam was a formality. Izuku sat at the desk, the armor drawing more than a few stares and whispers from the other students. He completed the test in less than a third of the allotted time. The questions, which ranged from advanced mathematics to ethical philosophy, were trivial compared to the intellectual rigors of Doom's tutelage. He spent the remaining time in a low-power meditative state, reviewing the schematics of the UA battle centers he had acquired from hacking their public network weeks ago. The practical exam briefing was held in a massive auditorium. The pro-hero present Mike was on stage, his boisterous energy grating on Izuku's disciplined senses. He analyzed the hero's quirk, voice, cataloging its potential applications and weaknesses, line of sight, dependency on respiratory function, vulnerability to sonic dampeners. As President Mike explained the 3 types of faux villain robots, Izuku's internal HUD tagged and cross-referenced them with his database. 1-pointer, lightly armored, agile. Threat level, negligible. 2-pointer, medium armor, ranged attacks. Threat level, low. 3-pointer, heavy armor, slow but powerful. Threat level, moderate. He was already formulating optimal dismantling strategies for each. A tall, blue-haired boy with glasses, Tenya Ida, shot to his feet to ask a question about the mysterious 4th robot type on the handout, and to reprimand Izuku for his apparent lack of respect. Izuku didn't even bother to look at him. Subject to Ida, Tenya. Quirk engine. Displays rigid adherence to established rules and protocol. Lacks adaptability. A good soldier, a poor commander, his mind catalogued automatically. President Mike explained that the 4th type, the 0-pointer, was an arena trap worth no points and best avoided. A gimmick. An obstacle to test evasion and risk assessment. Izuku filed the information away. Avoidance was, after all, a form of efficiency. The examinees were divided and sent to their respective battle centers. Izuku found himself in Battle Center B, a sprawling, full-scale replica of an urban environment. He stood before the massive gates, surrounded by other students who were stretching, trying to psych themselves up, their nervous energy a palpable fog. Izuku remained perfectly still. He closed his optics for a moment, and his HUD became his entire world. A tactical map of the city overlaid his vision. He linked to the city's public camera network. Their cybersecurity was pathetically easy to bypass, and began tagging the locations of the initial robot clusters. He could hear President Mick's voice counting down from a distant speaker, but he ignored it. The exam had already begun. Go! While the other students hesitated for a moment, confused by the abrupt start, Izuku acted. He did not run through the gates with the herd. Power to repulses, 40%. He murmured, the command processed by the neural link. The vents on the soles of his boots glowed with green energy. With a powerful, silent thrust, he launched himself vertically, soaring over the gates and high above the rooftops. The sight of the flying armored figure stunned the students below, and elicited a gasp from the teachers watching in the monitor room. Whoa! What's that kid's quirk? President Mike yelled. In a darkened corner of the room, a tired-looking man with black hair and a capture weapon wrapped around his neck narrowed his eyes. It's not a quirk, Shota Aizawa said, his voice a low grumble. There's no biological energy signature. It's technology. And something else. From his vantage point, Izuku had a commander's view of the battlefield. He saw the robots and the students swarming toward them. It was chaos. Inefficient. They were fighting each other for the same, easy targets. A waste of energy. He angled his descent toward a sector of the city the others were ignoring, a dense cluster of warehouses. His HUD flagged 3 targets inside. He landed silently on the roof of the largest warehouse, the impact absorbed by the armor's inertial dampeners. Engaging, he whispered. He didn't bother with the door. He focused his will, gathering the arcane energy he had so painfully learned to command. A sickly green light coalesced around his gauntlet. Arcane lance. He fired a bolt of pure magical energy that punched through the corrugated steel roof as if it were paper. There was a shower of sparks from below, and his HUD confirmed, 1-pointer, neutralized. 1 point. He leaped to the next building. 2 2-pointers were patrolling the alley below. This time, he opted for a different approach. A panel on his right wrist slid open, deploying a thin, filament-like cable. It was a logic spike. He dropped down behind one of the robots, the repulsors in his boots silencing his landing. Before the machine could even register his presence, he slammed the spike into a maintenance port on its neck. Uploading Basilisk Protocol. A calm, synthesized female voice, the armor's AI assistant he had named Regent, informed him. A progress bar filled in his HUD. Upload complete. Target is now an ally. The robot's single red optic flickered and turned green. It immediately swiveled and opened fire on its former compatriot, tearing it to shreds with its own cannons. 2-pointer neutralized. 2 points. Izuku retracted the spike from his new ally. Patrol and engage all hostile targets in this sector, he commanded. The robot gave a confirmatory beep and trundled off to do his bidding. In the monitor room, the teachers were speechless. Did he just hack the robot? A teacher asked in disbelief. Not only did he hack it, he turned it. Mizu, the principal, said, his beady eyes gleaming with intense curiosity. In seconds. The level of technological and tactical proficiency is unprecedented. Izuku continued his systematic purge. He didn't engage in brawls. Every action was precise, every expenditure of energy calculated for maximum effect. He used a targeted electromagnetic pulse to disable a group of 3 one-pointers at an intersection. He laid a magical trap, an arcane rune of paralysis on the street, and watched as a powerful 3-pointer drove over it and seized up completely, allowing him to dismantle it at his leisure with a series of precise plasma cuts to its joints. He was a ghost, a predator moving through the city with terrifying purpose. His point total climbed at an astronomical rate, Regent's voice calmly announcing each new acquisition. 15 points. 24 points. 37 points. The other students were beginning to notice. They would rush toward the sound of an explosion, only to find the smoldering, neatly disabled husk of a robot, and no sign of who had destroyed it. Izuku was not just outscoring them, he was clearing the board before they could even play. Okay, this kid is seriously starting to freak me out. Present Mike shouted, watching Izuku's point total blaze past the 50-point mark. He fights with no emotion. Aizawa observed, his gaze fixed on the screen showing Izuku's point of view, a world of tactical overlays and threat assessments. He's not a hero. He's a soldier. All Might, watching from the back in his skeletal form, felt a cold dread wash over him. The boy he had dismissed on that rooftop, what had he become? This cold, efficient machine was a twisted mockery of the crying, desperate fan he had met. Izuku moved to the central plaza, where a large number of robots had converged. He landed on a flagpole, surveying the scene. At least a dozen robots of varying types were engaged with a handful of students. He could pick them off one by one, but it would be time-consuming. Efficiency dictated a more comprehensive solution. He leaped down into the center of the plaza, his landing cracking the pavement. Every robot and student turned to face him. Sovereign to Regent. Initiate Protocol Chimera, he commanded. Acknowledged. Rerouting primary power to sonic emitters and magnetic grapple lines. The AI replied. He slammed his gauntlets together. Instead of an explosion, there was a high-frequency, inaudible pulse that scrambled the robot's targeting sensors, causing them to fire wildly at each other. As they fell into disarray, 4 grapple lines shot from his back, latching onto the largest of the 3-pointers. He reversed the polarity of the electromagnets, then fired his boot repulsors, spinning himself and the massive robot in a circle. He became the center of a 5-ton, metallic wrecking ball, smashing the other robots to pieces in a devastating whirlwind of destruction. He released the cables, letting the 3-pointer crash into the side of a building, and landed gracefully in the center of the newly created scrapyard. Sector cleared. 28 points acquired, Regent announced calmly. The other students in the plaza could only stare, their jaws agape. Izuku's total villain score now stood at a staggering 77 points, a number most considered impossible. With several minutes still left on the clock, he turned to leave the plaza. His mission here was complete. Seeking out the few remaining robots was an inefficient use of his time. And then the ground began to shake. A shadow fell over the plaza, vast and absolute. From behind a skyscraper, The zero-pointer rose to its full, terrifying height. It was a monster of metal and wiring, 15 stories of chrome and fury, its single red eye glowing with malevolent intent. The sheer scale of it was an act of psychological warfare. The other students didn't hesitate. They screamed and ran. Their faces were masks of pure terror. This was not a test. It was a force of nature. And it was worth 0 points. Engaging it was pointless, Izuku agreed. His HUD flashed with a red warning, threat level, extreme. Avoidance recommended. He turned to leave. This was not his problem. It was a gimmick, an obstacle. Help! The cry was faint, but his helmet's audio sensors picked it up and amplified it. He turned his head. On the other side of the plaza, near the path of the advancing behemoth, a girl with brown hair was trapped. Her leg was pinned under a large slab of concrete, dislodged by the robot's emergence. She was struggling frantically, her face pale with fear, as the zero-pointer's colossal foot rose, preparing to take another step that would crush her into oblivion. For the briefest of moments, a flicker of the old Izuku flared to life within the cold logic of the new. The desperate, heroic instinct that had sent him charging toward the sludge villain screamed at him, "Save her!" Then, Doom's voice, cold and sharp as obsidian, cut through his memory. "Sentiment is a liability. A mission requires a logical solution, not an emotional one. What does the equation dictate?" His mission was to score points and demonstrate his superiority. Saving this girl offered no points. It was a risk with no reward. The logical choice was to leave, but then, a new variable entered the equation. A new memory. "You will show them a new kind of power. You will establish a new paradigm." Leaving her to be saved by a pro-hero, or worse, leaving her to die, was not a declaration of superiority. It was an admission of limitation. A true sovereign, a true ruler, does not shy away from obstacles. He dominates them. He imposes his will upon them. The zero-pointer was not just an obstacle. It was a statement. And he would provide the answer. His mind became a crucible of cold, hard calculation. The old instinct and the new training fused into a singular, terrifying purpose. He would save her. Not with a smile, not with a desperate charge. He would save her with overwhelming, calculated efficiency. "Regent, full diagnostic scan of the zero-pointer," he commanded, his voice a low, intense hum. "Focus on structural integrity, power conduits, and locomotion systems. I need a weak point. Now, scanning." The world before him was painted in wireframes and energy signatures. Data scrolled down the side of his HUD at an impossible speed. "Armor plating is too dense for conventional ballistics or plasma weaponry. Primary fusion core is heavily shielded. However, the primary leg actuators and knee joint servomotors are under extreme stress and possess multiple hydraulic lines. They represent a potential structural failure point." A plan, elegant and brutal, formed in his mind. He didn't have the raw power to destroy it. But he didn't need to. He just needed to make it fall. He took off, a green and gray blur, flying not at the robot's head or chest, but straight towards its advancing leg. "That kid's insane! He's going to get himself killed!" one of the teachers in the monitor room shouted. Izuku flew in a corkscrew pattern, easily dodging the clumsy swipes of the zero-pointer's massive hands. He was a gnat to its giant. He landed on its massive knee, the magnets in his boots anchoring him to the metal plate. "Time to rewrite some of the rules," he muttered. He placed his left palm flat against the armor plating of the knee joint. A complex, glowing green circle of runes materialized around his hand. "Rune of Eldritch Conduction, activate." The runes burned themselves into the metal, a piece of arcane graffiti on a canvas of science. It was a magical targeting beacon. He then leaped off, soaring into the air to gain distance. He raised his right gauntlet, which began to crackle with raw, untamed electricity. This wasn't a precise plasma bolt. This was him gathering his will and channeling the raw power of a storm. "Jolt of galvanism!" he roared, unleashing a torrent of brilliant blue-white lightning from his hand. The lightning did not strike randomly. Guided by the rune, the entire, devastating force of the spell converged on that single point on the robot's knee. The metal groaned, turning cherry red then white hot. The hydraulics screamed as they were flash-boiled, and the servomotors were overloaded with 1,000 times their operational capacity. With a sound like a mountain breaking in half, the zero-pointer's knee joint seized and then shattered. The colossal machine teetered, its leg no longer able to support its immense weight. But its momentum was still carrying it forward, directly towards the trapped girl. Izuku was already moving. He flew to the opposite side of the robot's upper torso, his boot repulsors glowing with maximum power. He braced himself against its chest. Regent, emergency power to all repulsors. Full focus burst on my mark. Warning, this will drain core energy to critical levels. Do it. He pressed his gauntlets against the machine's chest. Mark, a concussive, invisible wave of pure kinetic force erupted from his entire body. It was not a punch. It was the application of physics on a grand scale. He was the fulcrum, and he was pushing the lever. The zero-pointer, already off balance, was shoved sideways. It toppled with the slow, majestic finality of a falling skyscraper, its descent angled away from the girl. It crashed into a line of buildings 100 meters from her, shaking the very foundations of the city block. A cloud of dust and debris washed over the plaza. Silence descended. In the monitor room, no one was breathing. They had just witnessed a single student neutralize an obstacle designed to be insurmountable, and he had done it with a combination of powers they couldn't even begin to comprehend. The dust began to settle. Izuku landed beside the trapped girl, his armor coated in a fine layer of gray powder. He was calm, his breathing perfectly even, though Regent's warnings about his low power levels were flashing in his HUD. The girl, Ochako Uraraka, stared up at him, her eyes wide with terror and awe. He didn't offer a hand. He didn't offer a comforting word. He simply raised his gauntlet, the fingers reconfiguring into a three-pronged pneumatic claw. With a low hum of power, he gripped the edge of the concrete slab and lifted it effortlessly, tossing it aside. He then knelt, his silver faceplate inches from hers. A small scanner emerged from his wrist, casting a blue light over her injured leg. No fractures detected, he announced, his voice a dispassionate monotone. Minor contusions and a sprained ankle. You will survive. He stood up, his analysis complete, his duty done. The klaxon blared, signaling the end of the exam. Izuku turned and walked away without a backward glance, leaving Uraraka sitting in the rubble, staring after the silent, armored figure who had just saved her life as if it were a simple matter of solving an equation. The final tally was displayed on the main screen in the UA monitor room, and it was met with a stunned silence. Examinee 7111, Midoriya, Izuku. Villain points, 92, new UA record. Rescue points, 60, perfect score. Total score, 152. 92 villain points. Present Mike whispered, his usual bravado gone. He didn't just pass. He broke the test, and the rescue points, another teacher added. The panel had no choice but to award him the full 60. He identified the endangered party, assessed the threat, neutralized it with zero collateral damage to any civilian, and then rendered immediate, accurate medical assessment. It was flawless. Aizawa leaned forward, his elbows on the control panel, his eyes still locked on the blank screen where Izuku's feed had been. He was impressed, but a deep, gnawing unease settled in his gut. The boy's performance had been too perfect. Too cold. It lacked the fire, the passion, the reckless heart that he associated with true heroism. It was the calculated perfection of a predator. Nizu, the principal, took a long sip of his tea, a wide, unnerving smile stretching across his muzzle. Well now, he said, his voice dangerously cheerful. It seems we have a most fascinating new student this year. A perfect score. Flawless logic, overwhelming power, and an ideology we have yet to discern. I am very much looking forward to seeing what this sovereign intends to do at our school. Miles away, in a Spartan, temporary apartment, Izuku stood before a shimmering holographic projection of his master's throne room. He had removed his helmet, and his face, pale and serious, was reflected in the dark screen of the projector. The examination is complete, Izuku reported, his voice crisp and formal. The primary objectives have been met. Initial observations of their methods and defenses suggest systemic vulnerabilities based on an over-reliance on quark-based power structures. My declaration was effective. The masked face of Dr. Doom regarded him from the hologram, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, the metallic voice echoed in the small room. Adequate. It was the highest praise Izuku could have hoped for. It was the only validation that mattered. The first step was complete. The world of heroes had been put on notice. A new power had arrived. The first day of school at Yue High was an annual spectacle. The press swarmed the gates, hoping for a quote from a faculty member or a glimpse of the incoming crop of hero hopefuls. The students themselves were a vibrant, chaotic mix of excitement and anxiety, their custom-tailored uniforms crisp, their faces bright with the promise of a future filled with glory and fame. Izuku Midoriya moved through this spectacle like a phantom. He had arrived on campus long before the media circus, his timing calculated to avoid any unnecessary interactions. He had exchanged his sovereign armor for the standard Yue uniform, but the effect was no less unsettling. The gray blazer and dark green tie, meant to be a symbol of unity and conformity, looked alien on him. It was a costume he was wearing, a disguise. His posture was ramrod straight, a stark contrast to the nervous energy of his peers. His walk was a silent, measured glide. His expression, once a canvas for every fleeting emotion, was now a carefully constructed mask of serene neutrality. He found Class 1A with ease, the massive, stylized door more for show than practicality. He slid it open and stepped inside, his eyes immediately beginning their sweep. The classroom was already half full, a loud, boisterous collection of the nation's elite youth. A boy with explosive blonde hair had his feet propped up on his desk, arguing with the tall, blue-haired boy from the entrance exam. A pink-skinned girl was laughing animatedly with a boy who had bright red, spiky hair. The moment Izuku entered, a hush fell over the room. Every eye turned to him. The whispers started instantly. "Hey, isn't that the guy from the exam, with the armor? He looks so normal without it." "Normal? Look at his eyes. It's like he's staring straight through you." Izuku ignored them. His gaze swept the room, his mind working with the cold precision of a threat assessment program. He wasn't seeing classmates, he was seeing assets, liabilities, and variables. Tenya Ida? Quirk engine. Predictable, rule-bound. Potential for high-speed insertion or extraction. Easily manipulated through his adherence to protocol. Ochako Uraraka. Quirk, zero gravity. Tactically versatile for environmental manipulation and rescue. Close-quarters combat ability is likely negligible. Displays a naive, idealistic demeanor. She met his gaze for a fraction of a second, her expression a mixture of awe and fear from their encounter at the exam, before quickly looking away. Katsuki Bakugo. Quirk, explosion. High-yield kinetic and thermal energy production. Volatile, emotionally unstable. A powerful but uncontrolled weapon. His pride is a critical vulnerability. Bakugo simply glared at him, a low growl rumbling in his chest, his earlier public humiliation still a fresh wound. Izuku's analysis continued, a silent, running commentary in his head as he moved to an empty desk in the back corner. It was the most tactically sound position, offering a clear view of all entrances and the entire classroom. He sat, placing his bag beside him, and folded his hands on the desk. Then he waited, his stillness a stark contrast to the restless energy that slowly returned to the room. His presence was a black hole in the social fabric of the class. No one approached him. No one tried to make small talk. He was the record-breaking top scorer of the entrance exam, a figure of immense mystery and power, but he projected an aura of such profound, untouchable calm that it acted as a more effective deterrent than any threat. He was there, but he was not with them. The classroom door slid open again, this time to reveal a man who looked like he had just crawled out of a sleeping bag, which, in fact, he had. Shota Aizawa, their homeroom teacher, shuffled in, his expression one of perpetual exhaustion. "It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down," Aizawa said, his voice a monotonous drawl. "That's irrational. Life is short." He scanned the room, his tired eyes lingering on Izuku for a fraction of a second longer than anyone else. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Put these on and meet me on the P grounds." He tossed a bundle of UA gym uniforms onto his desk. The class, startled by his abruptness, scrambled to grab one and head for the changing rooms. Izuku moved with the rest of the herd, his movements economical and silent. In the locker room, the boys' nervous energy was palpable. They talked loudly, postured, and compared notes on their middle schools. Izuku ignored them all. He changed with a quiet efficiency, his back to the room. His body, once soft and unremarkable, was now lean and corded with the dense, practical muscle built from a year of relentless physical conditioning in Latveria. Faint, silvery scars, thin as spiderwebs, traced patterns on his back and arms, remnants of failed magical experiments, and grueling combat training. They were a testament to the crucible that had forged him. When he turned, a boy with red, spiky hair, Eijiro Kirishima, approached him with a wide, toothy grin. "Hey man! I'm Kirishima. That was some crazy stuff at the entrance exam. That armor was so manly. What's your quirk? Is it building stuff super fast?" Izuku looked at Kirishima, his green eyes placid and analytical. He registered the boy's open, honest demeanor. Quirk, hardening. Simple but effective for direct physical confrontation. His personality suggests a straightforward and loyal disposition. Could be a reliable subordinate if properly directed. "My registered quirk is called technomancy," Izuku replied, his voice calm and even. The name was a fabrication, a convenient label Doom had created to satisfy the bureaucratic requirements of this quirk-obsessed society. It was vague enough to cover both his technology and the visible manifestations of his magic. "Whoa, technomancy! Sounds cool," Kirishima said, though his expression was a bit confused. Before he could ask more, Izuku turned and walked out toward the grounds, the conversation cleanly terminated. Kirishima was left standing there, feeling an odd chill despite his friendly intentions. On the P grounds, Aizawa explained the true purpose of the day's activities. A quirk apprehension test. A series of 8 physical fitness tests they had all done in middle school, but now, they were allowed to use their quirks. The stakes were high. "And the person who ranks last," Aizawa said, a cruel, tired smile on his face, "will be judged as having no potential and will be expelled immediately." The class erupted in panic. Uraraka protested the unfairness of it, but Aizawa's response was swift and brutal. "Unfair? You think natural disasters are fair? Or power-hungry villains? Or catastrophic accidents that wipe out whole cities? Yui is where you learn to fight that unfairness. If you were expecting a friendly school picnic, you're in the wrong place." Izuku felt a flicker of something that might have been respect for the man. Aizawa's philosophy, though crude, shared a kernel of truth with Doom's own. The world was not a kind or fair place. Preparing these students with harsh reality was more valuable than coddling them with false hope. The first test was the 50-meter dash. Izuku was paired with Ida. As Ida got into a sprinter's stance, the engines on his calves roaring to life, Izuku simply stood at the starting line. "Begin!" The robotic voice from the sensor chirped. Ida shot off like a bullet. Izuku, in the same instant, activated the repulsors in the soles of his gym shoes. They were a micro version of the ones in his armor, powered by a small, flat power cell strapped discreetly to his back under his shirt. With a silent, controlled burst of kinetic energy, he propelled himself forward, gliding a few inches above the ground. He crossed the finish line in 3.04 seconds, a fraction of a second after Ida. It was a remarkable time, but he had deliberately held back, calibrating his output to be impressive but not revealing the full extent of his technology's capabilities. Observation was key. Next was the grip strength test. While a large, 6-armed student named Mizo Shoji achieved an incredible 540 kilograms, Izuku simply held the device. He could have used his technology to augment his strength, or even applied a minor rune of reinforcement to his hand, but he didn't. He squeezed, and the device registered a meager 56 kilograms. A few students snickered. He was letting them underestimate him, letting them see a weakness. A ruler does not need to prove his strength at every opportunity. Sometimes, allowing your opponents to believe they have an advantage is the most powerful move of all. In the standing long jump, he used another controlled repulsor burst to clear the sandbox entirely. For the repeated side steps, his Latvian training in agility and balance allowed him to achieve a top-tier score without any assistance. He was a study in contrasts, a puzzle, overwhelmingly powerful in one test, disappointingly average in another. The test that drew the most attention was the ball throw. Uraraka had just shocked everyone by scoring an infinity symbol, using her quirk to make the ball weightless. Now, it was Izuku's turn. He walked into the circle, the soft ball feeling mundane in his hand. He could have launched it into orbit with a repulsor blast. He could have enchanted it to fly forever. But that was too overt. He needed to make a statement, but a subtle one. He held the ball, and for a moment, his eyes seemed to lose focus. He was extending his senses, not his physical strength. He was applying a lesson from his second pillar of training. Magic is not always a sledgehammer, child. Doom's voice echoed in his memory. Sometimes it is a scalpel. The laws of the universe are threads in a tapestry. A true master does not need to tear the whole cloth. He need only pluck a single, specific thread. Izuku focused his will on the space directly in front of the ball. He didn't enchant the ball itself. He altered the reality around it. For a fraction of a microsecond, he created a localized gravitational warp, a miniature gravity well behind the ball and a gravitational slingshot in front of it. It was an arcane manipulation of physics, incredibly complex and mentally taxing. To everyone else, it just looked like he threw the ball. But the ball didn't just fly. It vanished. It accelerated at such an impossible rate that it was gone from sight in an instant. The measuring device whirred, its sensors trying to track the object, before it simply glitched and displayed an error message. Aizawa stared, his eyes wide behind his goggles. He hadn't seen a quirk activate. There was no telltale energy signature. The boy had just thrown it. But the result was impossible. What was that? Kaminari, a boy with a lightning bolt in his hair, whispered. Did he just break the sound barrier? Bakugo's hands were clenched into fists, small explosions popping in his palms. That was not a quirk. Deku didn't have a quirk. So what the hell was that? This impossible, calm, powerful person in front of him was wearing Deku's face, but it wasn't him. It couldn't be. As Izuku walked back to the group, his face impassive, Aizawa stepped in front of him. Midoriya, Izuku stopped, his calm green eyes meeting the teacher's tired, penetrating gaze. I was watching you, Aizawa said, his voice low. I've been watching you since the exam. You move with a purpose that the others lack. Your power, it doesn't behave like a quirk. Aizawa's hair began to float, his eyes glowing a menacing red. He had activated his own quirk, Erasure. Let's see what you can do now. He tossed another ball to Izuku. Throw it. The class held its breath. Aizawa's quirk was legendary. It could nullify any emitter-type quirk just by looking at the user. Whatever strange power Midoriya had, it should be gone now. This was the moment of truth. Izuku caught the ball. He glanced at Aizawa's glowing eyes and floating hair. His internal sensors registered a wave of unfamiliar particles washing over him, but his systems were unaffected. His connection to the mystic arts was a function of his mind and his will, not his biology. His technology was powered by a shielded fusion core. Erasure was a biological tool for a biological problem. Against him, it was like trying to use a fire extinguisher to put out a star. He turned back to the circle. He held the ball up. This time, he decided a different demonstration was in order. He didn't use magic. A panel on the back of his hand slid open, revealing a small, circular emitter. A faint green light glowed within. It was a miniature tractor beam projector, a piece of technology so advanced it was practically science fiction. He threw the ball with normal human strength. It sailed up in a gentle arc. Then, just as it was about to begin its descent, the emitter on his hand pulsed. An invisible beam of focused kinetic energy latched onto the ball and pushed. The ball, already in the air, suddenly accelerated as if struck by a phantom missile, rocketing out of sight. The measuring device whirred again, and this time settled on a number, 801.6 meters. A top-class score, just a little behind Bakugo's. Izuku lowered his hand, the panel sliding shut. He looked at Aizawa, whose hair had now fallen. The teacher's face was a mask of profound shock and deep, deep concern. Your quirk doesn't work on me, Mr. Aizawa. Izuku stated, not with arrogance, but with the simple finality of a scientist stating an observed fact. My abilities are not biological in nature, therefore you cannot erase them. The implication of that statement hung in the air, heavy and cold. Aizawa, the hero killer's worst nightmare, the ultimate anti-quirk weapon, was useless against this boy. For the first time in a long time, Shota Aizawa felt a genuine spike of fear. This student was not just powerful. He was a fundamental exception to the rules of their world. The rest of the tests were completed in a tense silence. Izuku performed admirably but not outrageously, using a mix of his physical conditioning and subtle technological aids. When the final results were posted, he was ranked first, just ahead of a girl named Momo Yayorozu and Shoto Todoroki. Bakugo was fourth, a result that made his face a thunderous mask of fury. At the bottom of the list, looking devastated, was a short, purple-haired boy named Minoru Mineta. By the way, Aizawa said, his voice dripping with exhaustion as he erased the holographic scoreboard. I was lying about the expulsion. It was a rational deception to draw out your full potential. While most of the class sighed in relief, Yayorozu pointed out that of course it was a lie, and Izuku simply nodded to himself. It had been the most logical conclusion. Expelling a student on the first day based on a single set of metrics was inefficient and wasted potential. Aizawa was more rational than he let on. As the class headed back to the locker rooms, Bakugo finally snapped. He shot forward, his right hand grabbing the front of Izuku's gym uniform, his left hand sparking and smoking. Deku! He roared, his face inches from Izuku's. What the hell is going on? You were a quirkless, worthless pebble on the side of the road. Where did you get this power? Who are you? The class froze, watching the confrontation. Izuku didn't even flinch. He looked down at the hand gripping his shirt, then up at Bakugo's furious, contorted face. Let go of me, Katsuki, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. Not until you tell me. Bakugo screamed, an explosion detonating near Izuku's shoulder as a warning shot. Izuku sighed. It was a soft, weary sound. A sound of disappointment. Your rage makes you predictable, he said, repeating the words from their first encounter. It is a flaw in your design. You are a tool, not a strategist. And a tool that cannot control itself is a broken one. Before Bakugo could react, Izuku's movements were a blur of cold precision. His left hand came up and gripped Bakugo's wrist, not with brute force, but with a perfect knowledge of anatomy. He applied pressure to a specific nerve cluster, and Bakugo's hand, the one holding his shirt, went numb and limp, the sparks dying instantly. Simultaneously, his right hand chopped down, not in a strike, but in a precise tap against the side of Bakugo's neck, hitting the vagus nerve. Bakugo's eyes went wide. His body seized up, his breath hitched, and for a terrifying second, his vision swam. He stumbled back, clutching his neck, gasping for air, his powerful quirk rendered utterly useless. He hadn't been defeated. He had been switched off. Izuku straightened his uniform, smoothing out the wrinkles where Bakugo had grabbed it. He looked at the shocked, gasping boy on the ground with an expression that was not anger, not triumph, but something far more chilling, pity. You have immense power, Izuku said, his voice echoing in the stunned silence. But you wield it like a child throwing a tantrum. You believe power is the goal. You are wrong. Power is a means to an end. The goal is control. Control of yourself, control of your power, and ultimately, control of the outcome. You have none of the three. That is why you will always be second best. He turned and walked away, leaving Bakugo on his knees, not just physically disabled, but mentally and emotionally shattered. Aizawa watched the whole exchange, his capture weapon slightly tensed, but he hadn't intervened. He had seen enough. This wasn't a schoolyard fight. It was a dissection. The rest of the school day was a blur of mundane introductions to other teachers, including a skeletal, deflated All Might teaching heroics. During the class, All Might tried to catch Izuku's eye, his expression pleading, but Izuku's gaze remained fixed forward, his attention absolute, yet never directed at the teacher. He treated the symbol of peace like an uninteresting piece of classroom furniture. The unsettling calm that surrounded Izuku became his defining characteristic. He was a paradox. He was polite, answering questions in class with a terrifying, encyclopedic knowledge. He was tidy, his desk perfectly organized. He was quiet, never initiating conversation. But his politeness was the politeness of a machine. His quiet was the quiet of a predator. During lunch, he sat alone, eating a nutrient bar he had brought from Latveria. He didn't read or look at his phone. He simply sat and observed, his eyes scanning the cafeteria, cataloging the social interactions, the power dynamics, the subtle tells of his classmates. Urarika, egged on by Ida, who felt it was their duty as classmates to be welcoming, finally gathered the courage to approach him. Midoriya? She started, her voice a little shaky. I never got to thank you. For the entrance exam. You saved me. Izuku turned his head to look at her. His eyes were not unkind, but they were utterly devoid of warmth. Your gratitude is unnecessary, he said. My actions were the most logical solution to the tactical problem presented. You were a variable that required protection to ensure the optimal outcome of the mission. The mission was to demonstrate superiority. Allowing a fellow examinee to be crushed would have been a suboptimal demonstration. It was a matter of logic, not altruism. Urarika and Ida stared at him, dumbfounded. He had just reduced his heroic, life-saving act to a cold, tactical equation. But you were amazing! Urarika stammered. You took down that giant robot. The zero-pointer was a structurally inefficient design, Izuku replied, as if discussing a poorly built piece of furniture. Its size was a liability, not a strength. Its neutralization was a simple matter of applied physics and arcane energy manipulation. There was nothing amazing about it. It was merely correct. He turned back to his nutrient bar, the conversation, in his mind, having reached its logical conclusion. Urarika and Ida slowly backed away, a profound sense of unease washing over them. They had tried to connect with the boy who had saved her, but there was nothing there to connect to. It was like trying to shake hands with a ghost. As the final bell rang, marking the end of the day, Izuku packed his bag with the same quiet efficiency he did everything else. He was the first one out the door, moving with a silent purpose that brooked no interruption. As he walked down the long school corridor, a figure appeared before him, blocking his path. It was All Might, in his skeletal, true form. Young Midoriya, he said, his voice low and strained. We need to talk. Izuku stopped, his face impassive. I do not believe we have anything to discuss, Yagi-san. The use of his civilian name was a deliberate, cutting blow. All Might flinched. Please, he begged, a desperate look in his sunken eyes. The boy I met on that rooftop, the boy who ran to save his friend with tears in his eyes, what happened to you? This coldness. This power. Where did it come from? Izuku looked at the man who had been his idol, his god. He saw not a hero, but a frail, dying man clinging to a failed ideology. The grief he had felt was gone, replaced by a calm, clinical certainty. You told me I couldn't be a hero, Izuku said, his voice flat and even. You were correct. The path of a hero as you define it, a reactive, smiling symbol who inspires hope but cannot enact fundamental change, is indeed closed to me. I found your assessment to be insightful. He took a step to the side, preparing to walk around him. So I found a different teacher. One who believes that true salvation comes not from inspiring smiles, but from imposing order, not from reacting to chaos, but from eliminating its root causes. You told me to be realistic. I have. And the reality is that your way is failing. He walked past All Might, not even giving him a second glance. The symbol of peace stood frozen in the hallway, a cold dread seeping into his bones. He had not just crushed a boy's dream on that rooftop a year ago. He had opened the door for a monster. And now, that monster was walking the hallowed halls of UA, high, wearing the face of the very boy he had failed. The boy who was now the calm, unsettling, and terrifyingly powerful vanguard of a coming storm.